Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Live from the Blue Seats. If you already don't know or under a rock, the Rangers released a letter, but we'll get right into that in just a second. I'm producer JL. I was not on the episode that was recorded last because I was a little bit tired. I went to the game, was a bit exhausted. The Rangers really kind of took it out of me, but of course, Rob and Dave held the fort. Rob is not here with us currently, as Rob is with his family, and here is Dave, who is potentially neglecting his family. Yes, Dave, how are you?
What? My family?
I had a bit of a moment there, but yes.
I see that. Well, my girls are asleep. Well, let me rephrase. My oldest is asleep, and my youngest, I just got finished handing her a blue ice pack because she wanted the blue ice pack.
Oh,
And so she was screaming her head off, "Daddy, daddy, daddy," which was actually very rare that she screams for daddy. Usually it's mommy. So I was kind of loving it. And then I realized that all she wanted was a blue ice pack instead of whatever the hell else she had in her. I can't even say bed. She sleeps on a couch because she wants to. And we have a little floor couch on her room. She sleeps there. And she didn't want anything else but the blue ice pack. So she's now cuddling with a blue ice pack.
lesson
Anyway.
learned. Dave has his kids running his household. Next thing you know, the kids are going to start paying the mortgage and getting their own jobs while Dave and Dave's wife sit around and do absolutely nothing.
Isn't that the dream?
I guess it is.
I'm so confused why you think this is a bad thing.
Well,
Anyway.
I didn't say it was negative, but anyways. If you were hiding under a rock today and you are not a Mets fan, the news that came out of Rangerland was, let's just say, kind of striking. And I will say, the first time I saw this, I thought it was a joke post, but then I had to double check and see that this was actually officially posted to the New York Rangers social accounts and a press release as well. So apparently, we have ourselves another letter. Clearly, if you've seen the way the team has played, they have definitely way underperformed expectations, considering the way they started the season and how they were able to kind of stay afloat for some time. But it seems like Chris Drury, James Dolan, and Mike Sullivan have, let's just say, not totally waved the white flag, but this is definitely going to pause any sort of additions as they release the letter. And this is what it says. I might as well read it verbatim if you haven't seen it yet. A message from Chris Drury to our fans. We wanted to take a moment to connect with our loyal and passionate fan base. We know and feel your disappointment with how the season has gone to this point. No kidding.
Disappointment? Fuck off.
We are just as frustrated and want nothing more than to deliver an on-ice product you can be proud of. It's what drives us every day. No one in the organization is happy with what's transpired, from management to coaches to players. Over the last few years, we've had some successes and moments to cherish, but ultimately it was not the end goal. We are working relentlessly every day to bring a Stanley Cup back to New York because that is what our fans deserve. With our position in the standings and injuries to key players this season, we must be honest and realistic about our situation. We are not going to stand pat. A shift will give us the ability to be smart and opportunistic as we retool the team. This will not be a rebuild. I'm sure James Dolan made sure he put that in there. This will be a retool built around our core players and prospects. We will target players that bring tenacity, skill, speed, and a winning pedigree, with a focus on obtaining young players, draft picks, and cap space to allow us flexibility moving forward. That may mean saying goodbye to players that have brought us and our fans great moments over the years. These players have represented the Rangers with pride and class and will always be part of our family. As we start on this new strategic plan, we will continue to play hard with pride and passion for our fans. We appreciate your unwavering support for the Rangers more than we can describe, and thank you for all that you do for our organization. You will begin to see some of our plans come to light in the coming weeks and months. LGR. Signed, Chris Drury, President and General Manager. I have my thoughts, but Dave, why don't you tell us how you feel? Because I know this definitely stirred some stuff inside of you.
For starters, I'm going to be incredibly selfish and say all of my amazing rants from last night are now outdated. And I'm really annoyed at that because I thought they were, considering I didn't script them, they were very well put together, especially the one at the end where how do you not know what this team is? So I'm annoyed at that, but that's very selfish. I have the first thought that went through my head 18 months ago, so a season and a half, the Rangers were one bad bounce off an empty net away from a 3-1 series lead against Florida. Bobrovsky was out of position. I think it was Trocheck had an empty net and he just missed. I believe it was Trocheck. You and Rob are the ones that usually know who the players
Yes,
are.
it's Trocheck.
It was Trocheck. So I also see that you let me go first so you could eat more.
I'm glad you caught that.
So 18 months away from that empty net being a 3-1 series lead over Florida. And I don't think the Rangers blow a 3-1 lead. And we're also 2 weeks, 3 weeks from the supposed offer of Brennan Othman and a second-round pick for a 31-year-old Kiefer Sherwood. So you're telling me that losing 4 in a row before the Winter Classic did not make you think, maybe this team just sucks? It took the 4 games after, when you don't have Fox and Shesterkin. They were losing with Fox and Shesterkin, and you didn't see. So that was the first thought that went through my head, because all that gets to the singular point of, does any single one of us, do any of us trust Chris Drury to do this right? And that's the thought that went through my head, and I know where I sit on that, because I'm looking at this roster, and we're going to build around our core players and prospects. So to me, that reads as Mika Zibanejad, no move clause. JT Miller, no move clause. Vlad Gavrikov, no move clause. Adam Fox, no move clause. Igor Shesterkin, no move clause. So Fox and Shesterkin aside, and I guess Gavrikov, like, none of that is jumping out at me as, hey, that's a good core to start with. But again, I don't know, because Jason Robertson is on the block, as I've been screaming about all year. So maybe they're able to pull in Jason Robertson. I'm guessing Laugh would be that gone in a theoretical trade there. But like, besides the fact that I don't trust Drury, I love how he literally Control-C, Control-V on the 2017 letter and was like, yeah, that's good enough. We'll just change a couple of words. No originality. But they recognize that this team sucks and they need to change it, so that's good, right? Right, JL? That's good.
Yes. Well, the first step of improvement is the first step of recovery is admitting that you have a problem. Okay. And I will honestly say I really think obviously I haven't been on the pod in some time, so I was at the game on Wednesday night, and for some reason there was this sort of defeated feeling, and you can see that the players were, all season you can see that, they were really putting in the work. They were gunning hard, and yeah, they might have lost some games, but they were still playing hard. Wednesday was the first time I actually saw them legitimately just give up. And that broke my heart in many ways because of the fact that it was still a very attainable game up until at least midway of the third period, once they started putting pucks in the back of the net. Ottawa was not really doing much. They were capitalizing on the chances that they had. So, I kind of had a feeling something was going to change, because there was this, a lot of the losses that, we feel at Madison Square Garden, especially myself, they just kind of have this. Yeah, you're disappointed, of course, but there wasn't this sort of lifeless feeling that I felt a lot last season. Wednesday was the first time it actually felt like something that came out of last season. Very similar feeling, just kind of dead. The fans, we were really trying our best to make that place rock, and they did not feed off of that energy. So while I'm not surprised that this letter came in, I am surprised at how early it is. I was probably expecting maybe something to come out in terms of a statement, at least up until maybe close to the Olympic break. So you're talking about maybe the second week of February, because obviously the roster freeze will happen. And so, they'll play in the Olympics for 2.5 weeks and change. And then, we'll come back and there's going to be about a week and change remaining until the trade deadline. And, I've probably thought maybe either before the Olympic break that's when this came out. My initial thoughts on this, I remember covering that letter, the Gorton rebuild letter, years ago when it happened. The language is very similar. And honestly, I'm kind of glad that they finally realized it. We can sit here and deliberate, timing and why they maybe could have done it earlier, but I kind of understand why they waited, because you have a new coach. You want to see how some of the players react to the new personnel, right? So you want to give them as much of a leash as possible. One of the things that was a bit of an issue was that, at least in terms of the player relations, that occurred in the past, was that the players got no leash, you know. And I guess, with JT Miller, with some of the additions, with some of the prospects, the kids here, you want to see how far they can go. um and unfortunately, it just turned out that it didn't work. There's something wrong. Now, obviously, we all know the problem is Chris Drury. We want somebody who's going to be more qualified or has a little bit more experience to take that position. But being that Jim Dolan is incredibly loyal to his capos, there's no sense in getting upset that Chris Drury is going to be the one, at the helm. We can't get him fired. The team itself has to be the one to make that decision. So kind of getting upset at Drury, you can get upset with his moves and whatnot, but to kind of have that hope that he's going to get fired, it ain't happening. So my thought process is that, I hope he can prove me wrong. I don't have much faith. The one thing that's keeping me, I guess, slightly optimistic is the fact that he does trust Mike Sullivan's judgment very well. I'm going to assume that this is also probably this letter probably came from, some things that Sullivan told Drury. If there's one thing we know
That's
about
a very good point. That is a
right.
very good point. I overlooked that.
Right. Because remember, it's sort of like this three-headed I don't want to say three-headed monster, but it's sort of like this it's kind of like by committee now. And if there's one thing that we can at least say Chris Drury does, is Chris Drury actually somewhat listens to the people that are close to him. And if Mike Sullivan's giving him good advice, then you can probably say that, you could probably stomach him a little bit more if Sully has a lot of say in personnel. And I'm assuming he does, because the coach, this is the guy that he wanted. So you have to assume that Sully definitely has a lot of say in this. You didn't really see this with Peter Laviolette, this kind of, this co-juncture in terms of working with the team. And even when it comes to just how the team is set, with some of the roster construction, you can tell that there was some input on, okay, this player could probably fit this system or this, that, and the fourth. But at the end of the day, the guys didn't perform. We can blame the coaches and the management all they want, but on paper, this team is not as bad as they're supposed to be. Okay. The players are not absolved of any issues here. They are just as guilty of it as the management. Okay. Uh, whether it's JT Miller's stubbornness for playing hurt, because again, I will emphasize that man is more compromised than you can imagine, because again, he came here last season, he played well. He was probably one of the few that actually played well. You don't just completely flip a switch from a couple of months to the next and during the summer and just not get good at hockey. It's a gradual decline. He is hurt. He is compromised. He needs to take a back seat and heal up, or, have
Or go
limited,
to the Olympics, I guess.
yeah, or go to the Olympics. Well, there's nothing we can do about that. But JT Miller's compromised. Everything that went wrong did, but not only that, the players just didn't execute. And that happens, okay? You know, Alexis Lafreniere has not played up to his standards, and Lafreniere is incredibly frustrating to me because he shows these flashes and you just wish he can show it more. I'm very disappointed in Will Cooley. I thought we would see a bit more of what we were expecting in terms of having him turn into somewhat of a Chris Kreider hybrid. We haven't seen that yet. That was big. We traded Kreider away to give Cooley space, and I think everyone kind of universally agreed that that was the best trade-off for that. That didn't happen. Obviously, I still believe in Cooley. And I think that as long as they keep him and he's not included in a big trade for an elite player, Jason Robertson, then I think Cooley's a big part of this team. He hasn't performed as well. Vincent Trocheck, although he's probably been one of the faster players on this team, he hasn't performed well as well. Hasn't gone up to the standards that he should be. The only ones that you could probably say have been absolved really of performances are Vlad Gavrikov, Igor Shesterkin, Mika Zibanejad, Artemi Panarin, and Adam Fox. And Fox is injured. Shesterkin's injured. Everyone else has either underperformed or is disappointed. I'll throw Sam Carrick in there too. Adam Edstrom, before he got injured, was also playing reasonably well. Wasn't lighting it up. But my point is it's better that it comes now than later on where we're holding on to delusion. Okay, we're beginning to see the standings kind of slip. The Rangers are last in point percentage. They would need nothing short of a miracle to really make the playoffs from now up until the mid-March. Okay, even though there's still a lot of hockey left and anything can happen, like the letter says, you have to be realistic. And it's better that they realize it now. Now, if there wasn't the Olympic break going on, then maybe we would have seen this drag out. But just off of being there on Wednesday, you could feel something heavy, and it was very unnatural. You can tell that they were bogged down, they're beat up. The schedule has not been kind to them, but they also haven't been kind to themselves. So I'm glad that this came out. And one more thing before we, continue our discussion with this. If I like to throw a lot of different sports references around, but the way that I feel about the Rangers right now is somewhat similar to how I felt when the Wilpons owned the team. Now, why do you say that, JL? Because when the Wilpons owned the team, there was constant turnover, not just in front office, but also in player personnel as well. Especially after the whole Madoff incident where the team couldn't spend money because they were so tight on money. So the way that I was able to not want to throw a brick through a wall every time I would watch a Met game is to kind of have it in the back of my head to where I'd say, well, I know these guys aren't the brightest. It's going to take a lot for them to sell, which thankfully, they ended up doing. So all you would have to hope is just that they luck into something. It's very similar to, Jet fans will definitely understand this too. It's very similar that way. You hope that with Woody Johnson being there at the top, who's not a good owner, you would hope that the Jets would hopefully luck into something. Is that a bit delusional? Probably. But, if you don't really have trust in Chris Drury, then that's kind of all you really have if you want to continue watching the sport, at least watching the Rangers. Again, I also hold out hope that Mike Sullivan has a bigger influence in a lot of these decisions and maybe could counteract some of the bad things that Chris Drury does. Maybe with Sullivan there, things are a bit different in terms of players that he can acquire for depth, but also skill as well. They're trying to build a certain type of team. And if it means another season or two where they have to crater a little bit in order to get the assets that they need, honestly, so be it. What else is there to lose? Again, I will also say that I don't necessarily agree that this is going to be the next Dark Ages. I need to see Drury at least with another full season of Sullivan to kind of get that sort of that mindset. But I think that with whatever they have in Hartford and a lot of the draft capital that they have, and with some of the assets that they have that could be sent over for some futures, which let's be real, you can trade Mika Zibanejad. That contract is movable, as contrary to what many people say. I just need to see a little more. But am I disappointed? Yes. Did I finally want this to happen where they realized the error of their ways? Of course. So sorry, that was a bit long-winded. I just had a lot to stew on today. It's been a very interesting last 36 hours in terms of being a New York sports fan. So Actually, more than 36 hours. You could probably count the last couple days, honestly. Whether it's Jim Harbaugh joining the Giants, Kyle Tucker spurning the Mets, Bo Bichette signing with the Mets, and now Chris Drury sending out the letter 2.0, and the Yankees standing pat doing absolutely nothing. I mean, it's been interesting. So
So you were saying it was very long-winded, and I appreciated that because I cannot be rational right now because I am just stewing over this stupid team, and I can't be rational. So you brought up a very good point with Sully being in the room making that decision, making some of these decisions. When Rob and I lost our minds last night, we this letter obviously didn't happen, and we were still fresh off of the news of the Othman and a second for Sherwood offer that was made most likely made mid-December, around mid to late December, around Christmas. The Sportsnet news that the Rangers were still unsure of their direction and didn't know what to do just yet. So both of us, we didn't see this letter coming, obviously. So we
right.
weren't quite sure, and we assumed obviously the worst because it's the Rangers and they're basically trying to do their best New York Jets at this point.
Right.
But I want to talk prospects and players that you think will stick around
Okay.
because we know Panarin is gone.
Yeah.
And I've already two people that I know are saying, finally, now that he's gone, I can get back into this team, which I appreciate those
Yeah.
opinions. I appreciate that.
Agreed.
So I gotta
Well,
admit, if I didn't have the site, I may have taken that route too.
look, let me just point this out real quick before you go any further with that. I was
Hmm.
thinking about that. Okay. This is where I'm going to combine. Usually, when I at this juncture, when I when I talk about Panarin, I just make sure that people know that if I'm speaking about Panarin, primarily I'm speaking out about just his on ice performance only. Okay. I know we've gone through this before many different occasions, but I think personally, with everything added, with still people kind of held over from, last year and the year before, that there is some tension in that room with him. You know, I think that not only that, and not to say that the players hate him, but I feel like that whole thing has kind of cast a shadow over the team and just kind of him in general. So that's kind of like one of those last vestiges that's still kind of uh, holding on to the toxicity that went on last year, you know, or at least 2 years ago, rather. Um, so with him being gone, especially with the salary, coming off the books, if anyone wants to pay him the same amount of money for his age, 30 something year, listen, God bless you. Okay. It's not going to be from us. And so I think that kind of frees them from that obligation, but also too, just kind of with his play style relative to the system, he should do well, all things considered, with his skill set, but it just doesn't look like it fits. The thing that I notice he does a lot is he did this with Gallant, didn't do it much with Laviolette, is he stops in the defensive zone right behind the blue line and tries to make that long pass across the ice with either the center trailing or the center cutting to the middle, or cross ice pass to the other blue line for the winger. And I wanna say that a lot of that kinda resulted in some turnovers, which, obviously ended up hurting the team in the long run. So, the way that I see Sullivan's system is it's a very tight sort of, ebb and flow, close together kinda thing, because that allows for easier access to, dump-ins when the puck goes around the boards. With Panarin, I've always kind of seen him as kind of an odd fit. And you can see that he doesn't really fit. Mika Zibanejad, on the other hand, definitely has done well in this system so far, and I'm glad that he's worked out. But in terms of Panarin, and we'll talk about the other players in a second, it just kind of seems like he's the odd man out, and it's not really helping. And I feel like that's going to get remedied soon. I feel, and then also too, you don't want to say that Chris Drury hates Russians because he signed one to a 7-year deal and then gave his goalie, who is also Russian, an extension. But I think that for forward wise, I think that Drury would rather have somebody else. But anyways, you were saying, I'm sorry, I just had to mention that.
No, that's fine. And that's very important that when we talk Panarin, it's almost entirely on ice stuff. We know the off ice shit definitely impacted the locker room, and obviously is not a good look with how the Rangers handled everything, and that's putting it mildly. Sorry, I'm still coming down with whatever plague the girls brought home. So I'm looking at this roster. And I'm looking at, I was initially wanting to go into who's going to stick around, but I think it's a better topic to talk about what we think Drury can do. Because there are two routes with Panarin specifically. They can let him negotiate a X number of years extension that he wants with whatever team, and then do a sign and trade where the Rangers sign him and then trade him. But that really only matters if he's getting an 8-year deal somewhere. And I can't see Panarin getting 8 years. It takes him to age 35, 6, 7, 8, 9, 41, 2. Age 42. I can't see him getting 8 years. So I wonder if he's going to treat Panarin as a rental and get your first round pick and a prospect, which is typical for a player like Panarin. A good prospect, not, a Carey Terrence prospect. But there's that, and then there's the possibility, say, with Dallas, again, going back to Jason Robertson, what if Panarin wants 5 years at $12 million or something like that, which would put him in line with Mikko Rantanen's extension in Dallas. And that's less than what Jason Robertson wants in Dallas, rumored or supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
Can they sign Panarin to the extension, retain retain 50% on this year, so it winds up being a little 8 million roughly that they'd retain on 1 year, and then package him with Braden Schneider and a prospect for Jason Robertson. Is Drury creative enough to do that? Because there are a couple ways you can go with him.
Good point. I'm thinking, what they could possibly do in terms of. I've thought about this for some time actually. Gotta stop saying but I've thought about it, and I do think that there is a possibility for this team to, come out of this relatively unscathed for the most part. I think the biggest obstacle is Panarin because of his cap space, and thankfully the cap is going up, so it'll be easier to kind of weather the storm on a return for something like that, or even add assets to something like that. So definitely, I would love to entertain a Robertson trade. It seems like that's kind of the best fit for both the Rangers and Dallas. I think that Lafreniere is definitely going to be the subject of a trade. Definitely. I think Braden Schneider is going to be someone who is going to get moved as well. And I think that they'll probably have some, maybe they don't get thrown into one trade. Maybe Lafreniere gets checked into another trade. But also, too, if you look at the rest of the lineup, Taylor Radish might get you a late round draft pick if you're gonna, shed a controllable asset. Or Hovakanainen, same thing, will probably get you a low round pick. You get yourself somebody who is going to be under control for next year. I think Will Borgen's obviously. I think Will Borgen's going to stay. So I guess at the end of the day, I think that I think that, they're going to I'm just trying to think. I think that I guess maybe the easiest way for me to answer this question is that the easiest way for me to answer this question is that I think that Lafreniere's gone. Zibanejad, Miller, basically anybody that you named in that tweet with the no movement clauses, they're staying. Unless somebody decides to really, get this major deal that ships them off, those guys are all staying. And I think Trocheck stays as well, though Trocheck is probably the more logical one to trade because of the way his contract is, and it's sort of a steal. But then the Rangers are also shorthanding themselves because who's going to replace that? You know what I mean? So I think Miller stays, Zibanejad stays, Trocheck stays, Fox, Gavrikov stay, Borgen's going to stay. So probably Lafreniere goes, Schneider goes, maybe Cooley gets put into a deal. You know, um, if they trade Perot, that's a mistake. I think maybe Othman may get another leash at life, depending on what he can prove this time around. But we'll also have to see what he does for the rest of the season. So I think personally, I think Lafreniere's gone. I think Schneider's gone. So ultimately, yeah, it's kind of tough because I can't predict what Chris Drury's going to do.
It's impossible because we haven't been able to figure out what the plan is,
Right.
even even with the letter. Good God.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry for all the coughing, everybody. I don't. I talk. I get like 8 words in, and then I hack up a lung.
Well, that's not our problem. But sorry,
Jesus.
I just had to say that.
This is what we get for doing an emergency pod. I can barely talk.
Well, I have like half of a sandwich that I still have to finish, but I get it.
All right, so let's get to Trocheck then, because I'm sick and
Yeah.
tired of Panarin. I just want him gone at this point. I don't want to deal with
Yeah,
this shit
same.
anymore. So Trocheck, honestly, I'm sick and tired of talking about Lafreniere too, because first off, his trade market's impossible to talk about because there's value in having somebody like Laff signed for another 6 years if you're willing to bet on him just needing a change of scenery,
Mm-hmm.
which, well, change of scenery and power play time, because his counting stats are definitely impacted by the fact that he was never on the power play, or when he finally made it to a power play, it was a shit power play.
Yeah.
So there's that. So that's tough to gauge. Trocheck, on the other hand, has 3 more years after this at $5.625 million, and he's a 60-point player at a minimum. That's a hell of a contract.
It
Teams
is.
are going to line up for him.
The only way that I see them actually the way that I see them actually kind of doing that is if the return for that trade is absolutely bonkers. That a
And it's
team
going to be. I think
Yeah,
people sleep on Trocheck.
but see,
Trocheck is going to bring back something tangible.
but see, that's the thing though, is that if this was a full-on rebuild, then yes, I would be on board with that. But they're not rebuilding though, and I honestly don't think that. Maybe if it doesn't work out within the next year or two, I can understand that, but it doesn't make sense to me. And I'm just speaking about just kind of stats alone. He's still a very good player. I don't like the fact that people knock this guy. He's still one of the best face-off man in the league. But everybody seems
He
to
made
knock
some
him.
boneheaded fucking plays the last couple of the games.
Oh, well, who didn't though?
I know, but let me throw something at you and see if you're wondering, that might actually be interesting. The LA Kings just traded Philip Deneau. They're losing Andre Kopitar at the end of the year. Their center depth at that point is Quentin Byfield, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
They have Sam Hellenius, Hellenius, whatever. And that's really that's really it. And Brant Clark has been rumored to be on the trade block. So if the Rangers move on from Braden Schneider and Scott Morrow is not it in their eyes, does LA come calling, needing a center, offering Brant Clark and He- Hellenius, an American center, so Drew's going to love it, who is 6'6", 200 pounds, and was a second round pick.
Mm-hmm.
Do you go and get Brant Clark, who's 22 years old and a solid puck mover, a flyer on a high ceiling center, and a first round pick for Trocheck?
I mean, if it's available and they really give a haul, I wouldn't be against it. But again, with just the fact that they just named him captain and the alternate captain, and the locker room is still very fragile, it wouldn't make sense for Chris Drury to kind of do that.
I don't think I think they've had that conversation. That's the whole point of having these conversations, is
Right,
say, hey, we may have done stuff expecting you guys to be good, but you're shit, so we're moving on.
right.
Or do you call up Utah? And I floated this a bunch of times already, and look at Barrett Hayton.
Yeah, that I remember we talked about that. That I wouldn't be against, because that's sort of like a similar style of player, and I think the change of scenery would do well for both those teams, you know. Excuse me.
So do
So
you do, say, Trocheck for Hayton and get your own second round pick back?
I would do that, because then you can get a decent value player with that pick, whether it's a trade or even through the draft. But the only thing is that, you know, again, I just don't think that they're going to do that. I mean, we could talk about it for sure, but I would like for them to do that. I like Trocheck. You know, it's like I like Trocheck, but I'm not going to say, oh well, if this trade was proposed, I'm going to say no. I still think Trocheck has a lot of say here, at least in terms of
He
what's going to
does.
happen over the next couple of next at least the next 2 seasons. So
But my point is that's the kind of value Trocheck probably has. He's a 60-point center who plays all three strengths, wins faceoffs, has that big old leadership thing that everybody loves, and is going to be 33, 34, and 35. So he's not exactly on the wrong side of 35, which is what NHL GMs look for.
hmm
So I think that's the kind of value Trocheck has. You're probably getting, if Drury is really on this 1 to 2 year turnaround, he's going to get a center for him who is under 27 years old so that he can sign him to a contract. I think he gets another young roster player and either a late first or an early second. And since Utah, I'm not quite sure where they're going to be, I just went with the Rangers' own second round pick because that's going to be a high second rounder. Once you get out of the top five in any draft, it's a crapshoot anyway.
of course, yeah.
Now, there's a lot of possibilities here, and there are teams that are starved for offense, starved for center depth. Minnesota definitely needs a center. I just don't know who on Minnesota would come back. They don't have picks or players anymore.
Right.
But I think Florida would be an interesting one too. I
Well,
just don't know who from Florida would come back.
well, that's the thing though, is that, you know, if you trade with Florida, that's just if you especially if it's for Trocheck, you're essentially just getting the same player. So you might as well just keep what you know.
Well, do you get? Well, they're not going to trade Anton Lundell. Let's be real
Or they're
here.
not trading Barkov either. Those are the only ones that are really worth the damn on any of those teams in terms of center depth.
Yeah.
Unless they finally feel the need that Barkov is kind of past due, and you want to kind of get whatever, I don't want to say scraps, but whatever they have left over. I mean, it's that's sort of like, what are you going to trade for Evan Rodriguez? I think Trocheck's a much better player than Evan Rodriguez. Although,
Well, yeah. I was just pulling teams that could possibly use center depth at least right now, and Florida's one of them. But they're not going to trade Lundell for
no,
Trocheck. That's just not going to
no.
happen. So
Which is why,
Florida's probably out. But I'm just looking through teams that might be interested.
yeah, which is why again, like just kind of looking at the trade possibilities. Unless a team is really going to blow them out of the water and Chris Drury can't say no, I think Trocheck, like I said, is going to be part of this team within the next year or two at least. You know.
I hope not, because Trocheck is probably the only player on that roster that has significant value that they're willing to trade.
Well,
Adam Fox is the only other one that has value, and I mean significant, like true game-changing packages back.
Yeah. But then if you're just looking at it, at least on Chris Drury's side, you think James Dolan, is going to allow him to trade a center who is cost effective? I don't
I mean,
think so.
Dolan hasn't cared about dollars in a while. Dude's got more money than he can spend in his lifetime. But he did say he has given Drury his full approval to do whatever he needs,
Yeah,
and
but
I'm guessing this includes this.
do you really believe that though? I
Do
mean,
we have a choice?
we really don't. But I just can't see. It's kind of like I feel like Dolan has a lot of sort of like mixed, messages. I don't see it. Just it wouldn't make sense to me that if you're gonna send a letter out, only then unless it's like again, I'm probably at the risk of repeating myself right now, but you know, I can't see Dolan going on WFAN, giving Drury his vote of confidence, having this letter come out explicitly stating that this is a retool, and then just kind of trade Trocheck when Trocheck is probably one of your better centers. I just can't see it. I would love the
Well,
possibility.
timing matters. Timing matters. If this is a 1 to 2 year turnaround starting in 26, 27, let's give it 2 years because it's probably not a 1 to 2 year, it's a 2 to 3 year. That's the end of Trocheck's contract.
Well, my guess is that I'm going. Okay, so this is probably where I'll probably sort of minimize this. I think they give it another year at
They
least.
shouldn't. They really
Maybe,
shouldn't.
but they're going to though because of the fact that you know because you have to look at the factors of what's gone on. You have the tight schedule, you have the Olympic break, you have the injuries. There was a stat that I read where the team has only really been healthy together for 11 games. And that definitely plays a part because when they were together for those 11 games, they won 7 of them. And that's key because when everybody is able to play their roles without issue, then you don't run into these types of issues that you're having now. And also the schedule too, with all the games being close together, that's done a number, and they've also played the most amount of games, pretty much of one of the teams that have played the most amount of games. So that also plays a part. So what they're probably going to do is get rid of, like I said, the lower rung assets, and they're probably going to keep a guy like a Trocheck. At the least, they keep him because of Miller, you know. And
Let
I
me ask you a question then. If you were running the team, would you trade Trocheck? I know what you're saying about Drury. I want to get what you would do. I'm
well,
going to put you on the spot.
that depends on if I'm rebuilding or retooling. And
Well, it's a retool.
if in a retool, no. In a rebuild, yes. If ideally, I would want the rebuild, and I've been very vocal about that. That I would that although I do understand why have made points in the past where I understand why, and it's not really wise to do that. A lot of what I say is primarily thinking what Chris Drury would do, and I don't think Chris Drury would just kind of blow it up like that. But if I'm retooling the team, on the other hand, I have to think, well, okay, the whatever Trocheck trade I get has to blow me out of the water because center depth is so lacking. Granted, they are a bit lucky with the resurgence of Noah Laba, and maybe you want to see if you can throw Mika Zibanejad back over the middle. But with the way Mika has responded, whether it's shifting from the wing to center, I don't want to mess with that. And considering that, you know, he's not going to waive anything, then I have to deal with Mika Zibanejad. So that definitely plays a part, which is fine because honestly, Mika's been fine. He's been way more productive this season than last. And I think that if he just keeps this up, that contract won't be as bad as it should be. Even if it gets to a point where he becomes a power play merchant. But if I'm tasked with rebuilding the team, yes, I'm trading Vincent Trocheck, and I'm going to try and maximize as much value as I can because, again, like you mentioned, and everybody knows, his contract is probably the most trade friendly out there. Um, but in terms of a retool, no, I'm not going to do it because he's not old. Yeah, you mentioned that. And it seems as if there is still somewhat of a path for this team to win. And honestly, with the way that they played at the start of the season and their effort level, with a couple of tweaks of the knobs, it's not impossible. And today's NHL, you don't need a superstar team to win. You just need to get it done at the right moment. Obviously, they haven't done that this year. So if I'm tasked with just a retool, then yeah, I'm keeping them because you know why? It's bleak out there. Now, if the class of this free agency would have been a little bit more full, whether, McDavid would have been available, Eichel would have been available, even Kaprizov would have been available to a degree, then yeah, maybe I'm singing a different tune and I'm waiting towards the summer. But because of the fact that the free agent class is so kind of, bad, it's really not. I mean, Artemi Panarin is going to be the best free agent, unrestricted free agent out there. And then Jason Robertson is an RFA. Doesn't exactly inspire much confidence to try to build a team. So you retool for the season, wait till next year, and then maybe kind of capitalize off of some things. And maybe something comes in a trade. You also have to remember that the only thing is don't know what Drury would look for in a trade. It was a bit different before when he was looking at those deadline deals and Kopp and Vetrano, even Wenberg and Wenberg and Roslovic, or even Tarasenko, Kane and Mikkola, which by the way I will say that I think Mikkola and Tarasenko would have been perfect for this iteration of the Rangers right now, because they would have done well if they would have had that 2023 team with Mike Sullivan. They win the cup that year, or at least they make it far in the playoffs. Because I think Sully would have had a lot of those guys working hard, and they had a nice blend of kind of veteran talent, you know, and sort of some of the young kids that were taking spots. So I thought that was a really well put together team, just bad coaching. So I don't know. It's really hard to tell because we just don't know what his plan is. But if I had to put myself in the situation where I'm rebuilding, yes, Trocheck's contract's probably the first one that's getting shipped out. Then I would look for a potential. Oh, I'm not even, and I'm not even talking about Adam Fox too. You can't waste another year of Adam Fox like that. That's another reason why that this is just a retool, not a rebuild, because you still have a lot of talent. Look, this is not me advocating for Drury, or sort of kind of trying to pie in the sky with this current roster, but us as fans of our own teams, we tend to devalue a lot of our players. We do. That's natural because we see other teams have different players and we kind of want that. And to a degree, sometimes it's justifiable. You look at a guy like a Lafreniere. I know I'm mentioning him, but I have to, just mention for the sake of mentioning it. When you look at Lafreniere relative to sort of Macklin, Celebrini, Connor Bedard, or some of those other first round picks, you kind of want something similar out of that. So in that sense, it's kind of right to understand, oh, well, how come my guy's not playing to that level? But at the same time, though, you know, we get so frustrated with certain things with certain players that we tend to forget that these guys are actually pretty decent. We're not like, the Ottawa Senators, or to a degree before they started winning games, the Buffalo Sabres, where they would just have this dearth of talent in the past. This team still had, these guys are still very good. you know are they older? Yeah, but they can still fit into some place on this team. It's just up to Chris Drury to try to find out what those side pieces, those extra pieces, those tertiary pieces are to complement that properly. You know, JT Miller's not a bad hockey player by any means. He's about a season and a half removed from a 90-point plus campaign. Mika Zibanejad is showing his true colors again as being an effective two-way, but offensive center / wing. Adam Fox is Adam Fox. He's a potential Norris Trophy winner. Vincent Trocheck is your prototypical second line center. He's got speed, and he's a good face-off man. There are teams that don't have that. Look at Vancouver. Outside of Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser, there's not as much as you might think. So that's another reason why I don't think that there will be sort of this, Dark Ages 2.0 because a lot of what they have now can be complemented by some of the players that they have in Hartford. I think Adam Sikora is probably a really good piece that they can add at some point within the next couple of years. You have obviously Gabe Perreault. Who can you think of a Gabe Perreault's type of player that they had during the Dark Ages that they
Well,
trade away?
Mike York, who
That,
they
exactly.
traded. Well, they traded him for Tom Poti.
For Tom
But I
Poti.
am going to. Oh, let me just check Adam Sikora. 7 goals, 8 assists, 15 points in 35 games. So puts him basically on track with his prior season. He is only 21 years old. I don't know where they stand with Sikora. I get what you're saying about the difference between a retool and a rebuild, and we're probably not going to get some of the trades that people are hopeful for. I just can't see this being a realistic move forward to a cup contender without making one or two extremely difficult trades. And I think one of them is Vincent Trocheck. And I think another one is going to be including Will Cooley in a deal for Jason Robertson.
Well, look, if that's what has
So
to
you have to you have to do both in this scenario because you're going to give up roster players to get Robertson. You're going to give up Cooley. You're going to give up I don't know, Schneider. You're going to give up Lafreniere. Okay, let's just say those three. Now you got to replace them, and Trocheck's the only way to replace him because you're going to get NHL assets for Trocheck.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're saying they could include Cooley for Robertson, great. They need if they're truly doing a rebuild and not a retool and not a rebuild, then you have to flip older assets now while you can. And the only player on this roster that fits the younger and faster, recouping NHL assets and frees up some cap space. I like Trocheck as a player, but I don't see how this gets done without moving him. And if they don't move him, it's a half measure, and I'm done with half measures.
Well,
That's just how I see this, and I'm happy to be wrong. But I'd rather them pull a Derek Brassard with him, trade him a year too early rather than a year too late.
oh no, I agree with that 100%. Like
And
that's where I
this
stand.
this is his year too early. You
Yeah.
trade him now. You don't worry about 26, 27 because that'll be his 60 to 70 point season. But you're going to see him start to trail off at some point. And while he's a great fit under Sully, I do like him as the second line center. He's the only player that you can get something for right now. Laff is not bringing back this kind of return. Miller's not going anywhere. Panarin is a rental. Zibanejad's not going anywhere.
So then
Borgen, if they decide to trade him, is going to get a couple of pucks because that contract is horrible.
I still don't think that one.
Borgen's been really bad since his hot start, dude. You really he's been bad.
No, he has. I mean, Schneider has also not been great as well. But
I'm so done with Braden Schneider.
I
Rob
don't.
said it best last
I
night too.
Yeah, I know. But I would honestly, at this point, rather go to war with Borgen than I would with Schneider because it's kind of like they're kind of the same defenseman at this point. And I think that Borgen has a little bit more offensive upside. I think he's a bit of a better skater too. But no, look, listen, I'm not against trading Vincent Trocheck. My fear is that the return is not going to be what this team needs, and then I don't necessarily trust them to try and replace him unless they decide to put Mika at center, which honestly is fine.
He's
You
been
want to
at
put
center. Miller's been the one at wing lately.
yeah, because Miller's hurt. So, but look, if they trade Trocheck and Zibanejad becomes the second line center again, fine, I can deal with that. I can, because that essentially kind of does its own sort of puts it together. But I just don't know what that return would look like, and I don't want to say it scares me, but it spooks me a little bit. Kind of having to spitball. Oh well, how is Chris Drury going to, underwhelm us? Although he hasn't had hasn't had a really bad track record with trades. Like some outside of the, big one of Pavel Buchnevich, a lot of his trades have not really been the worst, you know. So I don't know.
In
It's
a
just
vacuum, they haven't been the worst. Like if you just look at pure what's coming in versus what's going out, yes, I agree, but I don't think he's ever really had a plan, which is a completely separate issue.
but I I don't disagree with that. I don't. I don't disagree with that at all. It's just at this point it's just kind of, tough to kind of get a gauge on how they're going to move forward with this. But, any change is good, so but other than that, did you have any other thoughts in terms of players that could potentially be moved? I know, look, we probably talked about Schneider and Lafreniere ad nauseum already. We kind of already know what we feel about them. Is there any other player that you kind of foresee them potentially moving? I mean, because if you look at it, like I said,
No,
Vakken,
I got. I think they're going to look to move Adam Edstrom, assuming he can get healthy.
okay,
They clearly like Rempe. Rempe is a lot better than people give him credit for.
I
He's one of the
agree.
few guys who's a net positive in terms of puck possession on the ice. I also think they're going to move Sam Carrick. Carrick will he's not going to get a haul, but Sam Carrick, $1 million for what he's done for this team. I wonder if he fetches a late first round pick from a team that needs center depth. We've
I
seen Paul Gaustad got a first round pick way back when.
I could see that. Now, in terms of when they trade a guy like Carrick and they trade a guy like Trocheck, who do you think that the Rangers so obviously Trocheck would get replaced with a winger because if you can separate Zibanejad and Miller.
And Miller, yeah.
Who do you put as the fourth line center if Sam Carrick gets dealt?
Johnny Brodzinski.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to trade Brodzinski. A, he's not going to bring back anything.
No.
And
Is he under
B,
contract for next season?
no, he's a pending unrestricted free agent. But
Okay.
he is so well liked in that locker room, and he does such a good job with the kids. That's why we see him up on lines with Laba and with Perot and with Berard every now and then. It's because he's just so good with them and easing them into the pro game. He's basically an effective Ryan Reeves. I liked Ryan Reeves. He just wasn't an effective player with the Rangers, which sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Like I can agree with that.
Yeah.
Which
So you go temporarily, you got Zibanejad, Miller, Laba, Brodzinski in the 2 year, let's call it 2 year retool. It's not exactly bad.
no,
And
but
then, so who else is there? So we're trading Trocheck. Rempe also plays center, though I don't think he
no, he
should.
he would stick to wing. I think
Yeah.
but also I don't know how much they would get for Edstrom just off of the fact that he's been really beat up over the
He,
last couple of years.
yeah. I think
That's
Estrom
that's
is a sweetener in a deal.
Yeah, but also I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to keep him and just kind of keep the whole Edstrom Rempe thing together because Barclay Goodrow played very well with them. So if Barclay Goodrow can do it, Johnny Brodzinski can do it. But if Johnny Brodzinski doesn't come back unless they re-sign him, then who do you put in that spot? I think honestly, I don't see the only reason why I don't really see Sam Carrick getting dealt is because not only is he cheap, but also he's kind of like the heart guy at this point. And I think that they want that kind of guy on their team because, he's really one of the only few that actually go after people outside of Rempe who can't really do much because of his thumb. So that's why I don't think that they trade him. It's kind of, I feel like what I think what I think Chris Drury is going to do is he's going to keep these guys. Like he's keeping Carrick, he's going to keep Trocheck. I think he is going to try and maximize as much value as he can from Lafreniere, Schneider, Othman. Forbid
So the young guys, they're going to trade the young guys to get younger and
to
faster?
listen. I'm telling you, the only reason why I say that is because of the contracts that we have. which I understand does not make any sense. But again, when has any of this ever really made sense? I can sit here and tell you what I would do, but if I'm trying to think like Drury, then at least one of Schneider and Lafreniere is going in a bigger trade, you know. Although I will say though, I hope he surprises me. I really do. Which listen, I agree with you, Dave. I'm just saying. I'm being a bit of a mix of a pessimist and an optimist at the same time, if that makes any sense.
I'm being a realist in the sense that if this has to be done, if this is going to be done right, you have to part with guys that you like. And Trocheck and Schneider, let's stick with those two. Lafreniere doesn't really matter. Lafreniere's gone. But Trocheck and Schneider are two guys that Drury likes. And both can bring back significant packages. Right defense is such a value position, and Schneider's play style is something that teams want. And he's 24, and he's going to be somewhat cheap as a restricted free agent, probably around $4 million, $4 to $5 million. So people are going to line up for Schneider and give up something of value. Trocheck too. And you're not going to trade the guys that bring something back, then you're just running it back with the same roster and sending a letter and hoping that we like the letter, and then you trade Panarin and Taylor Radish and call it a retool.
Well, I mean, depending on
what
you're saying. Well, no, it's just you're just moving the chess pieces around.
Yeah, if they're doing a retool, they have to make decisions that are going to upset the locker room, that are going to upset the fans, probably going to upset themselves.
Well, that's kind of what he said in the letter. Yeah, I agree. No, and that's what he kind of said in the letter is that, it's going to come to some decisions that might, that might not go over well, which honestly, you need to do that. So I'm hoping that if they do end up doing that, it ends up not, completely destroying the locker room, which it's, done a little bit better over the last season and a half because it kind of seems like they're more of a unit more than anything, at least when they're playing on point, but with the way Mika has been very sort of outspoken about keeping his NTC and, obviously Gavrikov, Fox and Shesterkin and all that, it's going to be tough. It really is going to be tough. I'm just trying to just picture how this would look like because my brain likes to go in a million different directions on what this could look like, but we just kind of have to see what it is. Honestly, I don't, it's kind of tough to tell. But I do agree with you, though.
The frustrating part of this too is we have no idea how to get a read on Drury because he's never had a plan before.
Right.
All we know is retool.
Yeah. And I don't know, you don't really get a clear view of when they say that they're going to trade players who have given us good moments. So obviously, we all know one of those is Panarin, especially with the report today that, he will not be given a contract extension by the Rangers. So more than likely he will get dealt. So that's one. I don't think they're going to go the Mika route, like I said. So you know what? You might be right. Trocheck might. I'm just thinking of in terms of moments, and Trocheck has had some pretty big moments. The more that I think about it, the more that I do think he does get traded. But I'm just worried about the return is all. But
well, yeah, I mean, we're worried that Drury's the one to actually pull this off.
Right.
Yeah. That the silence that the two of us just had summarized everything.
Right.
We can talk about this all night long. The fact of the matter is none of us trust Drury to make this right because the first thing he did when he took over was he traded one of their best players for, I don't know, shit in a box. Not even dick in a box, shit in a box.
And I was, I don't want to say in a vacuum, but that one, I'm usually the type of person that I can defend a trade because I have to look at it from, okay, well, this person did it because of this. I looked at that trade and the only thing that I thought about was, oh, well, he's going to make a trade for somebody else to replace that, but he never did. The assumption was that he was trying to trade for Eichel so that they can have the room for him. but that never materialized. So why would you make such a trade if you're not confident that you can supplement that move properly? So that's where kind of my, you know, my trepidation started. But then he made some really good moves, with the Vetrano trade and the Cop trade, and the Justin Braun trade, which, I thought were really good moves for the team at the time. And, I know people, and I probably wasn't one to I'm never one to want to bring players back, but there were only really two players that I thought that they should have brought back in the couple of deadline trains that they made. One of them was Frank Vetrano, even though I wasn't too big on that one because he wanted a lot of money. And the other one was Tarasenko. I feel like Tarasenko could have been a decent asset just in him alone. The heck with Patrick Kane. I think Tarasenko would have been fine by himself, but
Yeah.
and then, but
I agree with you on that one.
at this point, what are you going to do? But any final thoughts, Dave, as we're approaching more than an hour on this? Any final thoughts about this?
You know what? One final thought, and it's another selfish one. Can we have one live from the Blue Seats, regularly scheduled live from the Blue Seats, recording Thursday, releasing Friday, that doesn't get outdated by noon on Friday? This is getting really annoying. I ranted so well last night, and it's all for naught, and I'm being incredibly selfish. But seriously, Drury, can you stop fucking around and let us have a podcast that is relevant for like a day instead of, 3 hours? Please? Pretty please? Cherry on top?
I guess the
Something?
yeah.
Anyone?
I guess the only thing I have to say before we wrap up is just I have, I think, about 4 or 5 games left on my ticket plan, which is funny because right before the Ottawa game, I paid off the rest of my ticket plan for the Rangers. Please just give me some fun hockey to watch. That's all, and just give me something to look forward to next year. That's all. So that's it. That's all I have for that. And I think we kind of exhausted, our thought processes on that. Thank you, Dave, for being available to do this emergency podcast. And thank you for everyone who's taken the time out to sit down, read, listen, and contribute to what we do. Like us and subscribe on YouTube. If you're interested in joining our Patreon, Dave has that all ready for you on the site to take a look at. Again, we thank you for taking the time out, and we'll catch you guys next week. Let's go Rangers, and please don't screw this up, Drury.